Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's African American Read In. My name is Tarina Harris. I'll be your host and facilitator for tonight, and I'm also the program director for Nia Cultural Center. And tonight, I have the pleasure of welcoming our local authors, Alice Gatson and Tommie Boudreaux. I'll be sharing a bit of background about African American Read In as well as their background, and then I will pass it on to them for their wonderful presentation. And so, African American Read In is a groundbreaking effort to encourage communities to read together, centering African American books and authors. It was established in 1990 by Black Caucus of National Council of Teachers of English to make literacy a significant part of Black History Month. The initiative was reached more than 6 million participants around the world. And so, a bit about our authors. They'll be sharing a book that they co wrote together. And so, a bit of background about that book. In 19th century Galveston, shores were a gateway for immigrants to Texas and destinations beyond. Slaves, the forced immigrants, were brought to Galveston as property to sell. The largest trade operation in Galveston was implemented by Jean Laffite, a pirate. The slave trade business began in 1818. However, for the most part, slaves entering the port of Galveston were destined for other Texas cities and other states. Images of America, African Americans of Galveston presents the community life and accomplishments of Galveston slaves and descendants of slaves and those who migrated to Galveston after the Civil War. The book celebrates Galveston's African American culture from the 1840s to 1960s. Alice Gatson is born on the island, graduated from the historic Central High School. She received her Bachelor's of Science degree from Hudson-Tillotson College, graduating with a major in biology and a major in chemistry. After graduation, she did a specialty at the University of Texas Medical Branch Allied Health Science Professionals, where she pursued her career in medical technology with specialty in microbiology. After 35 years of service, she retired from the University of Texas Medical Branch. A native of Galveston, Texas, Tommie Davis Boudreaux attended Galveston Public Schools, graduating also from the historic Central High School. She earned her Bachelor's of Science and Master's degrees in Education from Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas. She earned her administrative certificate from the University of Houston Clear Lake. Ms. Boudreaux is a retired Galveston Independent School District middle school principal. During her employment with Galveston Independent School District, she taught at Central High School, Sam Houston Middle School, and Ball High School, and served as the department chair for Ball High School. Please help me welcome Alice Gatson and Tommie Boudreaux, our authors for tonight.
Good evening. We're happy to be here, and we just I consider our work a small window of African American history in Galveston. So if anybody wants to take up the slack and share more, they certainly can welcome to do that. So I think that that's really about it. We can start. Well, Alice, you may want to say something too. Just hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Okay. Yes, let's get ready to roll.
Good deal.
Okay, and that first screen, it just introduces us again, and we will probably be speaking about some of those people that you see on the screen now. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, we entitled this Darkness to Light, and it's Ms. Harris mentioned a large number of slaves were brought to Galveston by Jean Laffite. He just traveled the Gulf Coast and actually came from New Orleans because they encouraged him to leave. And he settled on Galveston's land and continued his slave trading business. In the middle, you see a notice. This is a notice from the slaveholders of 1855-56, where they were going to have a meeting, and just to sum it up, they wanted to amend some rules for the slaves and the free Negroes. To the right, you have General Gordon Granger. Of course, he's the one who came to Galveston in 1865. and read General Order Number 3. So we can go to the next slide.
On the next slide, after the Civil War, the number of African Americans in Galveston increased. The men worked as laborers and on the wharf. And if you, on your left upper two photos, you can see those men on the top are laborers, and we have some dock workers in the one right below it. And the very picture on the bottom is a picture of the night after the 1900 storm, where they different African Americans came in, even from other little communities. They came in to help clean up Galveston. The women worked also, and they worked as in the house. They worked as servants, maids, cooks, and babysitters. So in the center, we have a young lady with the children that she keeps. Those she was a nanny, so to speak. She was a nanny. Next slide. And of course, everyone knows this man. This is our activist and politician section. And Norris Wright Cuny, he was a politician, union leader, and activist. He was born in Hempstead, Texas in 1846. Cuny's parents, his father was, he was the son of a white plantation owner and a slave mother. And as an adult, he traveled the U.S. and settled in Galveston, Texas, where he studied law. Cuny improved education for African Americans in Galveston and established a union for Black dock workers. He called that union the Cotton Jammers Association. And probably so because they use a special tool called a screw jack. And this enabled them to poke or jam cotton into the bales of the ship. So therefore you have cotton jammers. Next slide.
Okay, this is Jessie McGuire Dent. Some of you may be familiar with that name, McGuire Dent. Jessie McGuire Dent was born in Galveston on March 24th, 1891. She attended Galveston Public Schools and earned her teaching degree from Howard University in Washington, D.C. Jessie was one of the 22 founding members of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, founded on January 13, 1913, as a public service sorority. The newly formed sorority's first public service was participating in the Women's Suffrage March on March 3, 1913, and I understand people really gave them a hard time. The 22 members were the only African-American organized women's group to do so. She returned to Galveston and taught Latin and English, and later became Dean of Girls. But her greatest accomplishment was when she sued Galveston Independent School District in 1943 and won. She won the case for equal pay for African Americans principals, deans, and secretaries. The name you may recognize is on the building of the Recreation Center. But some people are not aware that the Recreation Center, that name is actually for her and her father. Her father was Robin McGuire. He actually owned the land in which the Recreation Center is now. The city of Galveston implemented eminent domain and compensated him for his property, but certainly it was probably not enough. So, and I think I can't remember, around 1999, Ms. Isola Collins and several Galveston City, when they decided they were going to renovate the center, renovate the park, she went before City Council to have them to name that building McGuire Dent. So the actual name is Robin McGuire and Jessie McGuire Dent. And that's a copy of her lawsuit on the other side. Okay.
All right, entrepreneurs. So to your left, we have Hazel Davis. She was born in New Orleans, Louisiana. She became a beautician at the age of 16. She moved to Galveston and married Leon Phillips Sr. in 1937. That same year, um, being the first African American female to have her own licensed beauty shop in Galveston. In the center, we have Mrs. Albertine Yeager. She opened a kindergarten in her home during World War One, and this allowed mothers that needed to work to have a place for their children to be cared for. By 1930, the nursery and now orphanage combination had become a nonprofit with a daily attendance of 108 in 1931. Now, on your very right-hand side, there's the Feldman's Department Store. This was a white department store located at 2202 and '04 Post Office Street in 1906 Galveston. The company was the first retail store to hire African American women to work in their waiting rooms. Now, during this was a time when African American women could not even go into stores, let's not try on clothing. So, here you go. Next slide.
Okay, at the top left, you see Gus Allen's Hotel. Gus Allen's Hotel, well, they say Gus Allen Hotel really accommodate a lot of African American people. During the Jim Crow era, when African Americans traveled, they couldn't check into any hotel or either dine any place they want. So entrepreneurs like Gus Allen built hotels, motels, and restaurants for the travelers. And they were actually listed in the Green Book. You'll find Gus Allen's Hotel in there. You'll find, I don't know if we have any people who attended Central High School when Mr. Pope was assistant principal. His mother had a rooming house. She rented out a room for people to stay when they travel. And there's still one building, I think it's on 25th Street, on the corner of 25th and, oh, I don't know, it's near the wall.
Strand,
Yeah,
yes.
near the Strand. It's still standing, but it's an antique store now.
Right.
Okay. Then we have Thomas Armstrong, better known as T.D. Armstrong. He was born in Meeker, Louisiana in 1907. He was 6 years old when his parents moved to Texas. He graduated from Prairie View A&M College. He taught math in Port Arthur for a few years, married, and moved to Galveston in 1938, and was employed as an assistant manager at Stroh's Funeral Home. In a few years, he actually owned the funeral home. He was a very aggressive entrepreneur. By the 1960s, he was considered the wealthiest African American in Texas. He owned so many things. He was a realtor. He owned washateria, dry cleaners, restaurants, just a very busy man. Let me see, where am I now? Okay, I'm sorry. In the May 1962 Ebony magazine, they declared T.D. Armstrong as one of the wealthiest 100 richest Negroes in the United States. Mr. Armstrong passed on December 28, 1972 at the age 1972 at the age of 56. Okay. On the bottom to the right, African American employees of Galveston Independent School District could not join the white credit union that was located at Ball High School. In 1957, a group of African American GISD employees pooled their money together and established their own credit union. For years, the credit union didn't have an office, they didn't have a building. Board members would meet at each other's homes. The transaction of business by the manager was held in a small space in his living room. Finally, GISD donated an old portable building, and that's the building they donated to them. As of now, it is housed in Alamo Elementary School. The credit union allowed anybody to join. And I'd like to share this with you. The credit union at Ball High School no longer exists. And just to make it simple, they were encouraged to close. Okay. BJ Jackson.
On your bottom left, we have B.M. Jackson. He was one of the first African American publishers and editor for the Galveston Examiner News from Houston, but this newspaper was established in 1938. Next slide, please. Our churches, our sacred places. Galveston, we have several firsts. Sacred places in Galveston, and not just Galveston, it's Texas, the first in Texas, not just Galveston. Among those, the Avenue L Baptist Church, the first Black Baptist church in Texas, formed by the white First Baptist Church congregation in 1840 for their slave congregation. Now, the building, the top building was built after the 1900 storm, and it was built by the Tanner Brothers construction and architectural firm in 1916. And by the way, the Tanner Brothers they were African Americans, and I think they did a great job. I was so excited when I found out that they were African Americans. So we have the old church on the bottom and the new church on the top. Next slide. Another church, we have the Reedy Chapel Church, top left. The Reedy Chapel Church, the property that the Reedy Chapel Church is built on was purchased for its slaves by the Methodist Episcopal Church on March 18, 1848. Next to that, on your right top, we have the St. Augustine Hippo Episcopal Church, and it's the oldest African American parish in the Episcopal Diocese of Texas, and it was founded in 1884. And last but not least, we have the Holy Rosary Catholic Church, the first Catholic parish for African Americans in Texas. It was organized in 1889. Now you're going to hear Tommie tell you later that the school was organized in 1886, but the church was 1889. The school was organized before the church. Tommie?
Okay, Rosewood Cemetery to the right on the bottom, you see a marker there, the historical marker, and you don't see a lot of headstones because over the years it was neglected. Founded in 1911, when several African Americans donated money to purchase land from the Levy family, and that included having a cemetery. The land actually they purchased actually went all the way up to the seawall and up to the east to 61st Street. So there was more land than just the cemetery. The first burial was 1912 and the last burial was 1944. When the few remaining members could no longer care for the land or the cemetery, T.D. Armstrong, the gentleman I spoke of earlier, he became the owner of that property. When Armstrong died, the family sold all the land surrounding the cemetery to a developer. The developer devoted the cemetery to Galveston Historical Foundation. This goes into institution of learning, education, starting with funds from the Freedom Bureau. White missionary Sarah Barnes established the Barnes Institute in 1869, the first school for African Americans in Galveston. It was located on Avenue M between 28th Street and 29th Street. It was later named West District Colored School. Next slide. Top left, the little small building that looks like it's about to fall down is the First Central High School. Founded in 1885, the first high school select was actually, I can't read because I had to print this and it's not printed, didn't print well. High School for African Americans in Texas, located at 16th Street and Avenue L. Top right is the Second Central High School, located at 15th and M in 1885 to 1886 to 1885. 81, 91. Oh gosh, I am making a mess of this. Okay. Top right, I'll say this again. The second location was at 18th and N, and it was used during 1886 to 1893. The bottom, this is the third building, the third Central High School, a beautiful brick building designed by the notable architect Nicholas Clayton, located between 26th Street and 27th Street on Avenue N. And that building existed from 1893 to 1924. Next slide. Top left is the fourth Central High School, now Old Central Cultural Center. This picture was taken before the third building was demolished. If you can see a portion of the old building that I showed you before. That space is now Jack Johnson Park, the building behind. Top right, founded in 1905, the color branch of Rosenberg Library established a library for the Galveston citizens. It was not just for the students. Actually, any African American could borrow a book. They had library cards. So that's why it is a library for the citizens of Galveston. That was founded in 1905. And then if you've passed by Central, if you know where the football stadium is, you can look across the street and you'll see that sign that still exists above the doors. Bottom left, this school was established in 1954. Okay, we've skipped.
Too far. There you go.
Okay. In 1954, and is now Central Middle School. The right bottom is the last class officers of the last class of Central High School that graduated on May 1968. The following year, Central High School merged with Ball High School. Therefore, Galveston only had one public high school. Okay, next. Too far. There we go. Top left is Cecil Henderson. Mr. Henderson was the first African American to serve on GISD school board. During his tenure from 1968 to 1986, he served in several positions, including president. Now, Alice mentioned Holy Rosary. You see at the bottom, that was Holy Rosary's, established this building, high school, for students. And I don't know whether any student could attend or whether it was just only the Catholic students. But I do remember that there was a school. It was founded in 1886 on the corner of 12th Street and Avenue K, moving several times because of increased enrollment. Over the years, because of financial problems, the school closed on May 28, 1979. Next slide.
All right, health and wellness. We couldn't have health and wellness without Dr. Herman Barnett, who was born in Austin, Texas in 1926. He broke the color barrier in 1949 as the first African American to be admitted and graduated from the University of Texas Medical Branch. Um, on your right hand side, the top certificate, that's his certificate of completion of his internship. In the middle is his certificate of his surgery residency, completion of his surgery residency. And all of this was done at the University of Texas at a time when African Americans were restricted as to how they attend classes and who would attend classes. Next slide. Now, this young lady, this is Wilma Garner Mitchell Gatson. She was a trailblazer for her time. She was the first African American to graduate from the University of Texas Medical Branch School of Nursing with a bachelor's degree. She also has been honored as a distinguished alumni in the University of Texas Medical Branch Hall of Fame. If you look at the top right, I hope you can see it. These slides look kind of small, but at the top right is the first hospital for African Americans built in 1902, or the colored hospital. At the bottom, well, let's do not the middle right. That's the second hospital built after World War. The second hospital was built, and that was due to the increase of the African American population in the area. And that was built in 1937. Now, on the bottom, you see, looks like a white lady in a white dress with her colored patients. And behind them, you will see what's called an isolation unit. And it's just a white tent. And that's where they would take care of the colored patients, so to speak. Now, before 1865, slaves that needed medical attention were taken care of by their owners, or, whatever they could, their herbs and teas, whatever they can do. But after 1865, most African Americans were taken care of at home still or in the hospital in the colored wards. And like I said, these two hospitals were the two colored hospitals. Now, the one on the bottom, some people, some of our audience may recognize as the old Ziegler Hospital. And it ended up being the old Ziegler Hospital, which was a mental institute. Next slide. Health and wellness again. And this was one of my favorite things to really research and look up for this book. It's National Negro Health Week, and this is their parade in 1938. In the early 20th century, African Americans had poor hygiene and health conditions. So a national movement was started, and it was called National Negro Health Week. And it was observed annually from 1915 to 1951. In Galveston, John H. Clauser was instrumental was instrumental in organizing this event in Galveston, in our Galveston schools, I would say. During Health Week, posters, flyers, bulletins, and programs were distributed in the African American schools. Pastors would give their health sermon the Sunday before the week to start the week off. And they would end the week with a parade through the African American part of town, which was probably down, Market and that area, and ended in City Park with a picnic and a concert. Now, I tried to find, and I'm still gonna try to find out, where is City Park, and I'm not sure if it's the Kempner Park now or it's located off of Market. There's a little park over there, and I'm not sure which one it is, but I need to do a little more research on it. Tommie, next slide.
Next slide. Okay. Take a look at the badge, and we had to have something to represent the first African American policeman in Galveston. And because there was no way for us to find a photo of them, we just represent them with a badge. During the Reconstruction, when Major General Charles Griffin was stationed in Galveston, he was not pleased with the police department. He instructed the mayor to dismiss the entire force. General Griffin submitted a list of officers he'd like to appoint. The mayor was totally upset because on that list were 5 African Americans. After communicating a few times, meeting together to discuss the list, the general dismissed the mayor and appointed someone in his place. The list that he presented to the mayor, all of the policemen became officers. Now, there were white policemen too. The 5 policemen that were appointed in Galveston in 1867. Now, keep that in mind. That's only 2 years after 1865. There were 5 African American policemen. They were William Easton, Anderson Hunt, Simon Malone, Solomon Raleigh, and Robert Smith. To the left is a policeman. I know Ms. Gatson mentioned Avenue L. This is Mr. William Menard Thomas. He was born, I've forgotten exactly when he was born, but I do know he was born before the 1900s. He and his family actually survived the 1900 storm, and he was employed. So at Avenue L, there one of the windows still has his name because the families came together and rebuilt the church. Um, Also had new furnishings, but they had people who donated money for those glass stained windows. And Mr. Thomas's name is still on one of them. It's to the left. He actually is I guess, an ancestor of the Thomas family. If you know Lawrence Thomas, I think they come call him, nickname was B-Bone. Courtney Thomas, Dana Thomas. He's one of their great great uncles. Okay. Okay. At the bottom, you see three men. These were our first firemen. The first African American firemen in Galveston were Genoa Walker, Lucia Pope, and Leroy Small. They were all appointed firemen in 1957. So it wasn't until 1957 that we had our first police officer. All of them were assigned to the same station, station number 3 on 29th Street, 29th and Market. Pope, Lucius Pope, is the only one still living, and he lives in California. And I had an opportunity to speak with him about 2 or 3 months ago because they did, there's a marker in front of that old fire station on 29th and Market that mentions their name as being the first fireman to integrate the fire department. So if you're ever on 29th Street and the building is not being renovated and it's not in the best shape, but the marker is there and you'll see their 3 names. Okay. Next. Okay, there are some people here that some of you may not know. To the top left is Camille Browning Howard. Camille was born in Galveston in 1914 and attended Galveston School. As a teen, she played piano and provided vocals for a local band, the Cotton Tavern Inn. She performed with the band for 5 years and then went on to California to try to, make a life for herself and become a star. Well, she did in her own right. She joined the Roy Miller Trio. The band became a 7-member group and changed its name to the Roy Miller and the Soul Senders. She was the vocalist and the pianist, but she stepped out on her own and started producing her own song. One of the songs that she produced, I think is Extramental Boogie. I think that she sold over 250,000 copies, and that was in 1948. She went on and traveled with the band, and in fact, all over the United States. I don't know if they traveled abroad, but I do know that she performed in Detroit because I received a book on a section of Detroit that was something like Tulsa, and she was listed there as performing at one of their bars. On the right is Mr. Charles Brown. Now, Charles Brown was actually born in Texas City, but as we mentioned earlier, Central High School was the only high school for African Americans in the state of Texas. Charles Brown lived in Texas City, and his grandmother rented a room across from Central High School so that he could earn his diploma. His grandmother made sure that he was taught instruments. He learned to play classical music. He played in a band with one of his teachers. One of his teachers, he went on to get a degree from Prairie View in chemistry. He taught in Baytown. He got a job with the federal government, but he also ended up in California, and he participated in a talent show and he won, and the promoter there wanted him to join them. So he is credited with two of the songs that we generally hear during Christmas, Merry Christmas, Baby, and Please Come Home for Christmas. But he was actually raised in Texas City, but he had to attend Central in order to receive his diploma. Next, we have Little Esther. Little Esther became a very popular performer. She was born and raised in Galveston, was singing the choir, and when she was 12 years old, her mother took she and her daughter to California. She too participated in a talent show and won, and there was a promoter there that asked her to join his roster of performers. She went on to have at least 10 top 10 numbers, but her promoter wanted her to change her name because actually she was actually born Esther Mae Jones. So when the promoter wanted her to change her name, she was riding down the street one day and she saw this Phillip Station sign. So she changed her last name to Phillips. She received a lot of nominations for her music, but she always lost. But one year in 1973, she lost to Aretha Franklin, but Aretha Franklin presented the trophy to Esther, saying she should have won. Little Esther Phillips died at age 48 in 1984. Now, everybody probably knows this man, Barry White. Barry White was just here a hot minute, I say. He was born in Galveston, but he and his mother moved to California when he was an infant. And many of you know that he became a very successful musician, recorder, actor. He did a number of things. And even though he wasn't here that long, we claim him as a BOI. Next slide.
All right. I'm sure if we look at the top left, we all know this man, Jack Johnson, or John Arthur Johnson, the first African American heavyweight champion of the world. He was born March 31st, 1878, and was raised and started his boxing career in Galveston, Texas. He was not only a boxer, he was an inventor. Jack made improvements to a wrench, and it got a patent for his improvement. Just a little on Jack, because we all know about Jack Johnson. He died in a car accident on June 10th, 1946. And this football player that looks like he's in all this ancient football costume, that's Ray Don Dillon. I'm sure a lot of the young folks know Ray Don Dillon. He was born in Tylertown, Mississippi. And at a young age, he and his family moved to Galveston. Here, he graduated from the Central High School class of 1948. He played football at Prairie View College, not Prairie View A&M University, but Prairie View College, where he earned his degree in physical education in 1952. He was the first Galvestonian to be drafted. He was drafted by the National Football League with the Detroit Lions. And later, he was drafted by a Canadian football team. Through all of this, the right knee injury ended his football career, and he came back to Galveston, where he started a new career. He worked for the city of Galveston as a recreation director, and later GISD, where he taught swimming and coached football under the famous head coach Ray T. Shepard at Central High School. When the high schools, Ball High and Central, merged in 1968, Mr. Dillon was appointed chief of the district's police department. Next slide.
Okay, some of you probably recognize these gentlemen. I'll first speak of Reverend James B. Thomas on the left top. Reverend Thomas was born in Galveston in 1924. He was a civil rights leader, working tirelessly to improve the lives of Galveston African American citizens. In 1959, he was one of the plaintiffs in a lawsuit filed by W.J. Durham, Thomas Dent, and Thurgood Marshall. Yes, Thurgood Marshall actually came to Galveston. He was petitioning for integration of the Galveston public schools. In January 1961, Judge Connolly ruled in their favor. A few days later, GISD implemented gradually integrating the schools, beginning in elementary schools. Now, Galveston was under a court order till 1968. You remember I mentioned the last class that graduated? Well, by that time, the federal government said you will have complete integration or there may be some problem with funding. So that's really why Ball High was merged. They started all type of busing, incentives for people to go to different schools so they could get the balance that the government wanted. So you can thank Reverend Thomas for doing that. So he also was the president for NAACP. He was elected to Galveston City Council, and I could go on and on about Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas just happened to be my neighbor. He and his family lived near me, and I would have to say that his family probably had a lot of vegetables from my mother's garden. Doug Matthews, on the bottom. Doug Matthews was born in Galveston on January 31, 1951. Doug attended Ball High his senior year. He was an honor student and an excellent athlete and was selected the most scholarly player. He was offered a scholarship to attend Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas, where he majored in government. After graduating from Lamar, he worked for the city of Galveston. Later, he became Galveston city manager. At that time, he was the only African American city manager in Texas. Doug still holds the title of the only African American city manager in Galveston, Texas. Next.
And this little funny looking thing is a fish hook. And this is a little nugget I like to throw out. This is Henry Ziegler's invention. Henry Ziegler was a free Black man living in Galveston. He was also a barber. He invented and patented a more efficient fish hook in 1854. And he later sold his invention in 1858 for $625. Now, I looked up to see how much would $625 be in this day and time. So I couldn't go back to 1858 when he sold it. My little calculator would only let me go back to 1914. So from 1914 up to 2022, that would be over $18,000. And for me, going through our entrepreneurs, it was just nice to find so many of our African American uh, uh, people patenting their stuff. That way, they were able to get money. That was Johnson and Mr. Ziegler. So that was a good thing. But this is it. This concludes our presentation, and we hope it's given you a bigger appetite for African American history in Galveston. Questions? Tommie, do you have anything else to say?
No, just I thank them for, and I'm sorry I stumbled over everything. I've got about 4 or 5 things that I'm working on. So, but I'm just happy to share Galveston history. I would have to say that working on this book, I learned more about my city than I knew. I'm born and raised in Galveston, and be honest with you, I didn't even know much about Juneteenth until I was almost an adult. I knew it was relevant to slavery, ending slavery, but I would just go to my mother's Juneteenth celebration in Mahare, Texas, and enjoy the food and all the fun. And I didn't know how Galveston tied into Juneteenth. So I'm proud to learn more.
I want to thank you both so much for that presentation. I want to welcome those who are viewing live. If you have any questions you'd like to share during Q&A, to please feel free to do that in the chats, and we should be able to see that. Ms. Boudreaux, Ms. Gatson, I want to introduce you to my colleague and friend, Cora Harper. She also works with me over at Nia Cultural Center. To be fully transparent, my laptop is about to die and I don't have my charger. And so in the event that happens, I'm going to take over. But I'll be with you until that does. And so for questions from the folks watching us here, I have a couple of questions that I would like to answer in the meantime. My first being, if you could share a bit about the process of creating this book with, getting all the images together, or even starting from the idea of knowing that this was something to create. If you could share a bit about that process with us, that would be really wonderful.
Well, first of all, okay, go on.
We thought that it would be an easy process. We thought this seems really exciting. Let's see what we can do. And all we have to do is, maybe put something in the newspaper, put it out there, and people will bring pictures that we could just research and find different stuff. And we're going to find a lot of things. Well, we asked for different things. We asked for pictures, artifacts. Nothing came up. Put ads in the paper and everything. I came up, and if anybody thought they would loan us pictures or whatever, Ike said no. And that made us have to start all over again. It was hard enough trying to get people. We hold on to our things, and we should. I know I do. So Sharon, yes, we losing her.
So Corey has to pick up the slack.
Yeah. Go
okay.
On,
well, I was going to say that this particular book is image driven. So for every entry, everything that you shared, you had to have an image. So every page has a picture on it. So if you look at the book, if you haven't seen the book, it may be one picture, like you have the policeman and on it, and you tell a little story about the policeman or whoever. So that was the difficult part. And as Alice said, we started out on it, I guess it was about 2006. And we weren't moving too fast. And all of a sudden, I came along, and people, like she said, people who said they had images, that they could have shared. They couldn't find them, but we were able to get through Galveston Historical Foundation. We got images from Rosenberg Library. We have several universities were kind enough to, because it's nonprofit, they were kind enough to give us the images to put in the book. Because I know I looked up the image of, I accidentally found Camille Howard. I was looking for someone else, and you know how things pop up on your computer. I think I was looking for Galveston musicians or something. She popped up, and I didn't know anything about her. And I decided I was going to buy an image where the pictures that I found cost over $200. So it was cheaper for me to go on Amazon and buy her album that had her picture on it. So I think that only cost me like $5.95. Same way with Esther
Got the
Phillips.
album.
I mean, yeah, what is the little CD? You know, the CD. I got the CD. So that was the thing. And then, of course, we did a lot of new research in newspapers. And like Alice said at one presentation, you end up going down a rabbit hole because you may have to read 4 or 5 articles something before you find just a little bit. So there were still some things that we were not able to get. We couldn't get an image. We knew some stories. People told us some stories, and we weren't able to get an image to go along with it.
Okay.
The Galveston Police Department had a really nice history section. There's a guy out there, one of the police officers. He's got a really nice exhibit that he likes to show, and it's an African American exhibit of the police officers.
Is that the police department?
So that was a big help to us.
Yeah.
Yes, the police department.
Yeah. Well, that's how
Miss
we got.
Alice, is that located at the police department?
Huh?
I was saying, is that located at the police department? Is that located at the
Yes, it is located at the police. It is located at the police
department?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I do know the fire department has those 3 firemen. I think the pictures are large. You can see their nice size. So they have a panel with their picture on it. So, yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Oh, okay. So, who find your book?
Huh?
What are your hopes for young readers who find?
Well, what we hope is that, they will read about Galveston's history. Some of the things, the reason they are where they are today, and just like with us, we know that we are standing on the shoulders of people who came before us and planted the seed. So I feel that they should want to know or should enjoy learning about their school. I know we have Ball High. Most of them in the last 50, 60 years have graduated from Ball High, but there once was a very powerful Central High School. Central High School was under Prairie View's ILA rules. And if you go online and just Google those schools that were under Prairie View, you'll find Central High School is winners in so many areas. I mean, we're not just talking about sports. We're talking about academics, music, debate clubs, so on. And in fact, one person mentioned that integrating the school was not very bad in Galveston. And I think one of the reasons, well, I had a coach to tell me, Ball High had one district in about 30 years. So they were kind of glad to get our athletes.
I bet they were.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Because I think our time is almost.
Inspiring authors.
What is it?
What?
Do you guys have any advice for inspiring authors?
Well,
don't give up, because
don't give up. If you haven't,
don't give up, because it's not going to happen. When you got a subject you're looking for, you're not going to find it the first time you're out to look. You're going to have to search in different areas, even talk to some people to get some ideas. It's not just going to be right there like in the encyclopedia. The encyclopedia might have some, but you got to go there's a route to it, and you need to follow that route.
It's time consuming, especially if you are trying to research old information, because some of it's just not available. I know that there was an African American newspaper, the City Times, that was published until I think in like 1914. So the library had some of those old papers. So I was able to look at obituaries and getting some information on the people, because some folks would just give me a name. So, well, I remember so and so with this. Well, tell me about him. Do you know when he was born? No. Old newspapers, obituaries give you a lot of information, because sometimes you find a name that you recognize. So, I know some Smiths. I know some Albertsons. I wonder if anybody's related. So you find yourself on the phone calling. You will contact the universities to see if they have information. Galveston College, I found that Galveston College, in some instances, if you're a Galvestonian, you can actually borrow books. There are books that Rosenberg Library that has on the third floor that you can't check out, but you can check them out at Galveston College. And that helped me a whole great deal. Once I realized that they had the same sources, but since I was a citizen of Galveston, I could have a library card.
But I must also say Rosenberg Library had tons of stuff. They had a lot.
They did. But Rosenberg Library charges. So, so I'm going to leave it at that. So.
Well, I really appreciate you ladies taking your time to not only research and get this information about our history, but to take your time and share it with everyone this evening. And we are so appreciative of it.
Well, you know what? I want to just say this right quick.
Yeah.
I think it's important to share. We should share, because that's how we find out about our past, by sharing. And we definitely need to know about our past before we try to go forward.
Well, I think Maya Angelou makes a statement like that. You need to know where you come from before you know where to go or when or where to go, something like that. So it's really true. So you can look back at where people started, but you want to move ahead, and you can take those things to build on. So,
yeah. Absolutely. Well, again, thank you, ladies, so much for your time and your effort. I appreciate it so much. And for everyone watching, tomorrow's reading will be June Collins' poem. She'll be sharing the works of her mother, Fredford Collins. And I hope everyone enjoys their evening. Thank you again so much. Bye, lady. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
Oh, yes. Thank you for accepting it.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.